coaching people all over on the Zoom calls, so I think a lot of human interaction. So that's why I thought something like this would be something I really enjoy.
Okay, well, good afternoon and welcome to Rotary, everyone. Before we get started, first I'd like to just have a little moment of silence in honor of Dr. Sid Jones, who passed away on May 10th. Services were held yesterday. Sid joined Rotary in 1961. Was a long-term member of our club. He was a Paul Harris Fellow and a Paul Harris Fellow +1. We'll just have a moment of silence, please. Okay, and now we will get started with
All right, the flag is outdoors to the left, so face that. And join me in the singing of our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose rough stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
our invocation will be brought by Peggy Rush.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for our meal today and for our guests and our speaker. We thank you for the privilege of belonging to Waco Rotary, for the fellowship of our members, for the ability to share ideas, but mostly for the opportunity to serve. May our words and deeds be always pleasing to you. In your name, amen. We have a few guests joining us today. We have Sean Harper, who's a guest of Tom Hill. Andy Harper, who's also a guest of Tom Hill. Nice. Sarah Pedrati, is that right? Did I pronounce that right? Guest of Jim Newcomb. And Kevin Faulkner, guest of Catherine Logue. Welcome.
Okay, so we'll have Rosemary come up and just talk a little bit about the district conference that we had and some awards that some of our Rotarians got. I also just want to say thank you to everybody for being flexible today with our new location. This is just a one-time event while they're having the rest of the club all taken up. So hopefully you enjoy the nice views up here at the football stadium.
Thank you, Russell. On our trip to having and hosting the Rotary Conference, the district conference in Waco, it started a couple of years ago, and we counted up and looked, and it was going to be Russell's turn to be president of the club. So he said, sure, piece of cake, I don't mind at all. And little did he know that it was going to be a big deal, and it was. It was wonderful. It was well attended. All the district members who came and attended thought our city, our zoo, our Mayborn Museum, Convention Center couldn't have been any nicer to host all the events. We had a ton of you guys that stepped up and volunteered running registration tables and organizing and welcoming. I have to say a shout out to my husband Harold because he was my #1 volunteer through the whole trip. As a result, one of the highlights of the conference was Saturday evening was our own Kim Patterson, a member of the District 5870 Hall of Fame, who received the Rotary Foundation District Service Award for outstanding service in promoting the Rotary Foundation. So a big hats off to Kim. And Sunday morning brought a great surprise to me. Our sneaky club president and cohorts had nominated me for the Rotary District 5870 Roll of Fame. It was a well-kept secret. I was so honored and so surprised. Believe it or not, I was speechless. But thank you all for the club for supporting the conference. Everyone says it was the best yet, and I think it was. Thank you.
And Rosemary, just to give, if you'll come back up here, just to give her a round of applause. Rosemary has really been like Miss Rotary this year. In addition to taking care of programs, youth service awards, the district conference, serving as an assistant governor, Rosemary really has done her. She's earned her Rotary crowns and hat for sure. Okay, next I'm going to introduce Sarah Pedrati, who is with Transformation Waco. And Transformation Waco is, I'm going to announce the Rotarians who helped with our DAP grant. These are Rotarians who went and spoke to a group of 7th and 8th grade students at Indian Springs, and basically on leadership, college, you name the topic. It just basically just kind of helped the students learn about something that they could achieve in the future. And so those Rotarians who spoke was myself, Steve Corwin, David Hicks, Don Schreiber, Lou Aaron, Bill Holsey, Ken Surrey, Tyler Martin, Amy Fields, Chief Victorian, and Jack Hill. So all the Rotarians who helped, I appreciate that. I think it was a good time if you went and did that. Generally, again, you do get more out of it than they do, but I think it was really received very well.
Thank you guys so much for having me this evening. We're incredibly thankful for the grant that was awarded to our middle school. Just a little history. After a difficult year and a half of COVID and having to pivot what our normal education activities look like, in July of 2021, GW Carver Middle School was destroyed by fire. At that point, we had to pivot what we were going to do with an entire middle school. And we had decided the best thing to do is to combine our two middle schools together, Indian Spring Middle School and GW Carver Middle School. And while that came with a lot of different challenges, it also came with opportunities to come together as a community and learn from one another, especially our students. One of the ways your grant provided that for us was through our AVID classes. AVID is a nationally recognized program which both our middle schools are a part of. Students in AVID are generally first-generation students that are preparing for post-secondary opportunities, whether that's careers or college. However, now with the combined middle school, we need to focus on leadership skills with our students more than ever. Our guest speaker series, made up entirely of Rotarians, provided our students a first-person view of different opportunities out there for them. They learned about ways that they can be leaders in their own space. I visited with classes several times and students expressed how Fridays had some of the best learning because the learning was based on real world experiences. I'm also a data person, so I pulled what attendance looked like on other days versus Fridays. And our students had the highest attendance on Fridays, and I do attribute that to the speaker series that you guys led for us. We coupled the speaker series with the new curriculum focusing on leadership development in preparation for college and career futures. I want to thank you so much for giving the opportunity to our students to learn from you, and I hope that we're able to continue this partnership in years to come.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, now I'm going to introduce Ken Surrey. Is out today, so he was supposed to be our chair of the day, but Rosemary, again, Ms. Rotary's going to fill in.
One thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about the conference is that Russell and Ashley gave presentations. Russell on Friday afternoon at our leadership conference, and Ashley on Saturday morning at the big conference, and they were in such popular demand that both of those presentations they're going to put up on the Rotary 5870 website. And so if you missed them at the conference, you can join me. So now I'm going to be Ken Surrey, because I asked Ken if he couldn't get Brice Cherry to do a program for us today. These are Ken's words. You've been reading Brice Cherry's work in the Tribune Herald for more than 2 decades. Brice began work at the Trib in 1998, following 2.5 years as a sports editor at his hometown paper, the Brenham Banner Press. He has covered sports at the high school, college, and pro levels, from state champions to national titles. Brice has been sports editor of the Trib since 2012, and is a 4-time recipient of the Celeste Williams Star Sports Writer of the Year Award by the Texas Associated Press Managing Editors. He also has won the Fred Hartman Excellence in Sports Writing Award from the Texas Press Association 3 times. His prose is always lively and informative, and occasionally a little opinionated. We welcome Brice Cherry.
Thank you so much. It is my privilege to be here. Sorry that Ken couldn't make it, but Rosemary, thank you so much for that introduction. That was fun. So we in the media don't often get to hang out in the presidential digs down here. We're down on the other end in the romper room, the press box. You know, that's where they put us. You know, as far away from the president as you can get. So this is nice. This is swanky. I'd like to come down here and watch a game, but I guess I'll stick in my little spot down there. So in the parlance of newspapers, the first sentence or paragraph of a story is known as the lead of the story. And most journalists can remember like great leads that they've read, perhaps some that they've written. One of the best from the world of sports writing came from the late Jim Murray of the Los Angeles Times. He was covering the Indianapolis 500, and he was writing a column from it, and his lead to his column was, "Gentlemen, start your coffins." I don't know if anybody died that day, but that was pretty dark, but he was a great writer. I always thought the best lead to a book that I ever read was not Call Me Ishmael. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I always thought the best I ever read was, "It's not about you." And that was the first sentence of the 2002 book, A Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. And it was very simple, but very profound, that if you're trying to find purpose in this life, that it's not about you. And it always kind of struck me as close to the heart of journalists, too. That's the way journalism is supposed to work. It's not about us as the journalists. We in the media are the storytellers, and are fortunate enough to do that, but we are not generally the subject of the story. Now, sure, we sometimes can inject some of our own perspective and insights and perhaps even humor into our writing. My favorite kind of writing to do is the column, which is just that. That's where you get to have, it's an opinion piece. That's where you get to as Ken's work said, that's writing to be opinionated and be a little share some of my insights. But I'm also aware, keenly aware, that you kind folks, when you are picking up the newspaper and reading it, that you're not picking it up to read about us as the journalists, that you want to know about what's happening with all the athletes and the coaches and the movers and the shakers who are playing and coaching and moving and shaking, right? So we appreciate that role that we have. And so in that spirit, today, I thought that I might share some thoughts about some other people. I think at the end, we're going to have a little bit of Q&A time, and that's honestly some of my favorite things to do when I get asked to speak. And so I'm more than happy to answer any questions about myself or my career or whatever, but I didn't want to sit up here and talk about myself all the time. So I was going to introduce you to a few other folks, so to speak, and none of them will really need any introduction to you. I'm going to start with Scott Drew. So Scott Drew, I remember when he first came to town and meeting him at his introductory press conference at Baylor. And I remember thinking two things. The first thing I was like, is this guy crazy? And the answer to that question was no, he's not crazy. Genius, perhaps, but not crazy. And the second question, or the second thought I had was, is he really as positive as he appears to be? And the answer to that is emphatic, yes, that is Scott Drew to a T. Scott has more bubbles than a Dr. Pepper float. I mean, he is just that way all the time. And so I remember going up to him at this press conference and introducing myself, and I was like, hi, I'm Brice with Waco Rotary, and he's like, my brother's name is Brice! Yeah, you know, I mean, it's just like, who is this guy, you know? But that's just Scott. Obviously, you all know what Scott has done in building up the Baylor basketball program into one of the elite programs in the country. He took them from the depths of the depth to, you know, the ultimate mountaintop. And that story has been told and retold, and it'll be told again. But it's the greatest rebuild in college basketball history, no question. But beyond Scott's, coaching exploits, his coaching acumen, I personally admire Scott the person. As journalists, we're not fans. Some people are surprised by that. I mean, I'm a sports fan, obviously, and I do have teams that I root for that are not in Waco. They all play sports down in Houston, but I'm long-suffering in that regard. We're supposed to be impartial narrators, so to speak. And that doesn't mean, though, that we don't like some of the people we cover. And Scott really is that nice. He really is that genuine and positive of a person. And one recent story speaks to this. So a few weeks back, I kind of helped organize a Waco Media versus Baylor Athletic Communications pickup basketball. We actually played a couple of them. We played them once, and then they wanted a rematch because we won both games. I'm just going to put that out there. So, yeah, and we were fortunate enough to play over here at Baylor. Specifically, Scott gave up his practice court so that we could play, in there. And again, nice digs. And he's got his office, if you haven't been in there in the practice gym, but his office overlooks the court. It's got a little balcony there that he can actually come out onto and watch. I think most of the time when they're practicing in there, he's down on the court. But yes, his office sort of overlooks the court. And so we're playing, and at one point, he comes out and he's like, hey, would you guys like some music? And we're like, yeah, sure, And so, pretty soon after that, we were treated to, some of the top hip hop songs of the day, I guess. It's probably what they had on, on play. I don't know. But anyway, that, like, to me, that you wouldn't see like most national championship college basketball coaches sort of doing that for the peons in the media. So that was kind of nice, but that's just Scott. He's just a nice guy. It's just his personality. I think it also ties very much to his faith. And not that he needs me to plug his latest book, but I will anyway, The Road to Joy. If you haven't picked it up yet, it's really an insightful look not only at the building of that Baylor basketball program, but also his faith journey. So I certainly would recommend that. And that brings me to my next person. So Clyde Hart, or as I call him and pretty much everyone else calls him. He's literally the only coach I call Coach Hart, because he has earned that title, right? He is one of the most successful track and field coaches in U.S. history. I mean, and he also just might be Forrest Gump. So stay with me here, all right? This is going to be right. It's not just because of all the running, but it's because his life has taken him all over the world, and he's met just the most amazing people, powerful people, and his stories have stories, okay? I mean, he's got so many stories, it's incredible. Did you know, okay, I do a couple did you knows here, that Coach Hart was the speed coach for the U.S. Olympic women's hockey team. Did you know that? Yeah, he was. When he first got that call, he was like, what? I don't know anything about hockey, but he does know about speed. So, did you know that he once helped train a racehorse? Again, when he got that call, he was like, you want me to do what? But he knows speed, and when people want people or animals to be faster, they come to Coach Hart, right? So, of all the beats that I've had at the Tribune Herald, we have certain sports that sometimes we cover regularly. I think I've had track and field the longest, pretty much since I've been at the Trib. And Coach Hart gave me like a deeper appreciation for track and field. I've gotten into it more because of his, explaining things. So when he retired in 2019, after 56 years at Baylor, I mean, come on, pretty incredible. I was in his office doing an interview about, him retiring and stuff, and then afterwards we're just talking a little bit more. And he says to me, so I want to write a book. Do you want to write it with me? And I'm like, yes, please. And so then, of course, life happened, and running a daily newspaper happened, and I fell back into the rhythm of my insane schedule covering local sports. And about a year went by, and then something else happened, and nobody would ever say COVID was a good thing, but it did for those of us in the sports writing realm give us a little bit more flexibility in our schedules, a little bit more free time, I guess. And so for about 8 or 10 weeks in 2020, I would go once a week over to Coach Hart's house, and for several hours listen to him tell stories, including stories about training racehorses and the women's hockey team. And my hope, my goal, is that perhaps by the end of this year I can get that book done. It's a long process, but that would be a prayer request for y'all. Just, I'm a good Baptist here, I'll put that out there. So anyway, that book, I'll just plug that someday in the future will come. Okay. The next person I'll mention, again, needs no introduction. She's not here anymore, but Kim Mulkey. So, the most competitive person I've ever met in my life, right? Yes, oh, easy, no question. And I actually told her that one time, and in the context of the conversation, I did not mean it as a compliment. But Kim absolutely took it as a compliment. And she said to me, and you'll forgive me because when I tell Kim Mulkey stories, I fall into my very bad Kim Mulkey impersonation, okay? She said to me, "How do you think I won all those national championships?" And I'm like, "Well, Kim, you're not competing with me, okay?" But that was Kim, and we did butt heads from time to time. And I'm not going to sit up here and bash Kim. We butted heads because partially she can be tough on the media. She's very demanding. We butted heads also because I'm more like Kim Mulkey than I would care to admit. And you poke me, I'm going to poke you, and so, you know, that happens sometimes. But I will never, ever deny that Kim Mulkey can really coach like nobody's business. And she also had a very good sense of humor. So you guys remember the year that her team went out to Lubbock and for the NCAA tournament, and she had a kidney stone. And she missed the first game of their NCAA tournament, right? And Leon Barmore, you know, coached them to the win, and then the next game, which was 2 days later, she was able to return, and I think she was still kind of recovering, but she was able to return, and they won. So I waited until we got back to Waco in sort of like more informal, familiar settings, right? But we were in a press conference over here at the Farrell Center, and I said to him, I said, "Now, Kim, I thought you were an old point guard. I thought you could pass the rock." And she says to me, and again, I'll use my Mulkey impersonation here. She said, "Now, Brice!" And that's how she said my name. It was with always about 17 syllables. "Now, Brice, I've given birth. It's worse than giving birth." But she did. She took it. She was a good sport about it. And, you know, I had to get my singers in with Kim when I could, because she certainly got them in us. And she was an adventure to cover, but has given me stories for days. And some of those I will not tell today. That'll be for Rotary After Dark. And so finally, I'll mention one other person, Robert Griffin III. So he has a statue right over there, right? You can probably see it. And when I first interviewed Robert, which I was called Robert, not RG for it. I mean, that's good for headlines. But when I first interviewed Robert, he was a freshman in high school at Copper's Cove. And it was after a UIL regional track meet that he had just cleaned up and pretty much won everything. And so I go up to talk to him, and I ask a few questions. And as I'm listening to him, I'm thinking to myself, this kid cannot be 14 years old. There's just no way. He was just so polished, so well-spoken, so intelligent. And again, kind of like Scott before, I think some of that's just his personality, but it also, I think, goes to his military upbringing. His parents both in the military, and so he had discipline in his life. But that was RG3. He was as smooth off the field in an interview as he was on the field. And he might have been, I think this is probably true, the most interviewed athlete in the history of Baylor University. I mean, so the way that the media gatherings worked back then, we would have a weekly Baylor football media session. And the way that worked is the head coach, Art Brice, would get up and he'd speak in a formal press conference where we'd all be sitting there and asking questions. And then that would break up and they'd bring the players in. And the players would different people had been requested by different media outlets. Well, Robert, because he was Robert, had been requested by everyone every week. And so the way that would work is he would come in and he would do interviews with all 4 TV stations first, and then he would do a radio interview, and then they would push him into an office kind of by himself, and he would do, on the phone, he would do some interviews with out-of-town media that were doing stories on Baylor. And he would do a few of those. And then last but not least, he would come to us, the print media. And we would have like a little semicircle of chairs there, and we would put Robert in the middle of it. And there was usually about 4 or 5 of us there, not that many. It was usually myself and John Werner representing the Trib, Jerry Hill of the Baylor Bear Insider, and then usually like maybe an Associated Press writer or Dallas Morning News, somebody like that. And they called that setup the Shark Tank. And I think this was pre-TV show Shark Tank. It might have been. I don't know how old that show is. But we didn't mind going last with Robert because ultimately we got the most time with him. So that was kind of a perk of waiting until the end. And the Shark Tank really was a misnomer. Okay. Because we didn't tear him apart at all, and rather he had us kind of eating out of his hands, okay? He was very thoughtful in his answers, very comfortable and at ease in those settings. John and I would always remark, and I always felt like Art Brice was a good interview. We'd always remark afterwards, man, we got more out of Robert than we got out of Art, because Robert basically would just tell us things that maybe he wasn't supposed to, but he was really good. And I'll never forget one time around Halloween, he showed up for his interviews with a hockey mask and like those Freddy Krueger knives on his fingers, okay? Those were some lively interviews, let me tell you. That was interesting, but that was just who he was. He was just, comfortable, and I always knew that if and when his playing days would end, that he was suited for broadcasting. And we're seeing that now. I mean, he's totally comfortable, totally at ease, talking about football or whatever. And he does have a little bit of that sort of goofy side that plays well too. So he's a natural. He's fearless, even when he's swimming with the sharks. Right? So that is all the people that I was planning to talk about. But I will open it up for questions. I think I have about 20 minutes for that, and then anything that y'all would like to ask. Yes, sir.
Brice, what's going to happen to Matthew Meyer? He's in transfer portal. He has a chance to go pro, or he may come back to Baylor. What's your insight on that?
So yeah, he's testing the NBA waters to see. So Matthew Meyer is a very confounding player, I would say. I actually wrote a column about him in this most recent NCAA tournament. That very first game against Norfolk State that they played. He had arguably his best game at Baylor. And I remember when he got to about 18 or 19 points, I pull up the media notes there to see what his career high was, and it was that. And you were like, this guy's never scored 20 points at Baylor? But that was Matthew a little bit. He would show his game in flashes. He was kind of at his best when he was coming off the bench, right? Where he could just sort of come in and, throw down a dunk or do something crazy and get the crowd excited. I think he's got enough skill to play in the NBA. I'm not sure it's enough. He's consistent enough to make it night to night on the NBA. So all that to say, it was a long-winded answer to your question, but he has entered the transfer portal. So if he doesn't get drafted, and I kind of figure he'll be in another uniform next season. Should have 1 year eligible. So, yes, sir.
You sort of mentioned with the Robert Griffin thing, Art Briles.
Mm-hmm.
Since you're talking about different characters or
Yeah.
people, what would you say about Art Briles, either as a person or a coach or whatever your thoughts would be?
Oh, wow, put me on the spot.
I might as well.
My opinion may be different than others. So I got along really well with Art. He was great to us in the media. I think he did an incredible job in rebuilding the program, obviously. That said, a lot of things happened that shouldn't have happened. And ultimately, as the head football coach, whether you agree with this or not, you're the CEO. And it all comes back to you. Buck stops there. And so I'm not anybody's cheerleader, but I think that the Board of Trustees did what they had to do. So that's just it. I mean, I've been steadfast on that. So. Yes, sir.
Brice, you've been doing this a long time, but how often do you just get in front of the computer and you just write a block?
Oh,
Just-
man, definitely. That's frightening. And what's really frightening is when you have like about 15 minutes before deadline and that happens. And the key to that is just at some point you just have to say, I gotta write something. And it may be garbage. And I'm certainly probably written some garbage, but at some point you just have to start plowing through it, just like, an athlete might. If he's not having a good day, you keep shooting, I guess, I mean, so, yeah, but that happens for sure.
Brice, tell us what your thoughts on the NIL, the name, image, and likeness deal with NCAA come up with.
Reforming college sports in a good way. I don't know. I'm not so sure. So I was always a little bit more. I would say the media really did a lot to bring NIL into the spotlight and sort of help bring it along, because a lot of people, especially nationally, wrote and talked about just how it was criminal that these athletes weren't getting money for their name, for their image, their likeness, for playing. I personally think there's a lot of value to a scholarship. Yeah. It's not cheap to go there. I mean, let's just put it out there. And so essentially, you are getting paid. Nowadays, they have stipends and everything else. That's it. Should they be able to have some access to their name and their likeness? Okay, I don't have that big a problem with it, but it has created this slippery slope. And now you're basically, the recruiting game is kind of the wild, wild west. And, some of the schools that have the deepest pockets are going to be able to get a lot of the top recruits. Now, some of those schools were getting those recruits anyway, and we've heard reports out of College Station that they have this multi-million-dollar slush fund, whatever, fund for recruiting. Jimbo Fisher sort of balked at that, but anyway, it's, I think eventually you'll see sort of a severing of the NCAA and college football, and college football will be its own league. It'll be basically like a pro football league, just with colleges.
It's taking the fun out of college sports. What's done.
Certainly, yes.
How are you feeling about this open transfer, lack of loyalty, lack of appreciation of your scholarship? Just go wherever you'll get paid more or way more or?
Yeah, it's, the transfer portal is pretty crazy too. I've written about the transfer portal. It's just a weird sounding thing. To me, it sounds very Star Trek. Loyalty, these coaches don't have any loyalty. They leave, they go. Why shouldn't the kids be able to go? That said, I think there are a lot of missed opportunities for kids that could have stuck it out at a place and maybe worked through and gotten their chance. And I'm not naming names or anything, but put it this way. When have you ever seen a recent Baylor football season where they needed their back, they didn't need their backup quarterback at some point? You're going to get that chance to play. So why not stick around and even though you didn't get the starting job, I think you see where I'm going with this. But I don't feel like it is fair for those athletes to have to, the coaches to have such power over where they can transfer. I am for allow them to go wherever they want, and they should have the freedom to do that. But I also think that there should be some more loyalty. And you mentioned the scholarships. Those scholarships, you may not be aware, but they're year to year. So, they get renewed, but they're free to go. So, yes, sir.
You comment on officiating these days, and specifically, how do you define a holding call in football?
Oh, wow. So, at Big 12 Media Days every year in the summer, in July, the first day I think usually starts with a Bob Bowlesby address to the media, State of the Big 12. And then the second day usually starts with the head of officials going over rule changes and different things. And then after that, you have all the coaches that talk to me. And I would just say, I personally find those little sessions with the officials very boring. It's a lot of minutia. I don't want to become an official, so whatever. That said, I feel like officials is the most thankless job out there. Maybe second to sports writers. And it's a very tough job, right? And I saw a tweet recently where one of our friends in the local media showed a video clip of a pitch that was outside the strike zone in a major league game, and it got called a strike. And he was like, "Bring me robot umpires already," right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, can we just get off of this and let the officials make mistakes? Personally, I am anti-review in all situations. And I'm an old Houston Weather fan, and they got screwed. I'm going to Super Bowl because back in 78 or whatever, 79, Mike Renfro was inbounds against the Steelers, and yet I'm still anti-review because it slows the game down, and you're just like, come on, And maybe that's part of my sports writerness coming out. I have a deadline, like these games to kind of move along, but I feel like we are too tough on officials. We don't allow them to make any mistakes. And yet we'll let a guy drop a pass or miss a block, but, if they miss a holding call, oh my gosh, So, and I think it's an epidemic on the high school and youth level to the point where there are major officiating shortages. We're going to be writing about this. People have got to get off these officials' butts, or we will not have any refs anymore.
That was a Bobby Knight story.
Oh, wow. So I didn't really, John Warner covers Baylor men's basketball for us, and I know Scott well because I'll go to some games and write columns, and and stuff, but I didn't really ever get many encounters with Coach Knight. He was a character, very much. And I will say one of the first, one of the best sports books I've ever read was A Season on the Brink by John Feinstein, that took you, like, it was the first I'd ever read that, like, took you behind the scenes into the locker room. And that was a very interesting and revealing look at Bobby Knight. And he got a little kid monkey in him, you know? Passionate, you know, for sure.
Most memorable game you covered and why?
Oh, wow. See, I knew that question was coming, and so I did try to think about that one. There's so many, but if I were to, like, narrow it down, I mean, it's hard to beat 2011 Baylor, Oklahoma. I mean, that game, besides the ending, right? Besides Robert rolling out and, you know, making that throw across his body, and I mean, and so I will go to that moment for a second. I'm down. So that was back at Floyd Casey, and at Floyd Casey, we used to come down to the field with about 5 minutes to go, all the media, because the interview room was on the other side. And, you know, so when the game ended, you would go to the interview room to do your post-game interview. So the last 5 or so minutes of the game, we would be down on the sidewalk. And I was on the other end zone from where Robert threw the pass. And David Kay, Baylor's sports information director, he was not the head guy then, but he was on the staff, was standing right next to me. And Robert makes his pass, and of course David works for Baylor, so he is a fan. And he's screaming in my ear, "There's your Heisman moment!" And I'm like, dude, I can't hear. But that game, and it's just the whole game. I mean, you guys remember the pass to Kendall Wright where it bounced off a guy and then he caught it in stride and kept going. It was a touchdown. That game was incredible. I will never forget that one. And I remember that was basically the crux of my column that day. It was like, you might live 50 more years, you will not forget this game. You know, so that's probably the answer. But there's so many that I have a lot of good memories of. That, and we are fans of great games, you know, for sure.
Last one.
It's more of a comment following up what he said about officiating. I've advocated for a long time in the NBA to help the officials call either a charge or a block.
Hardest call in sports. I'm going to put that out there.
Instead of putting numbers on the jerseys, print the salary that they make. The call always seems to go in favor of the guy who's making the
Well played. I'm a diehard NBA fan. I know a lot of people aren't. That's literally my favorite sport, NBA basketball. Hardest call in sports, block charge call. I'm sorry. There's no other answer to that question.
And you got to make it fast.
You got to make it fast. It's very tough. But to your point, is there superstar treatment in the NBA? Sure, there is. Yeah. Did Michael Jordan get calls? Heck yeah. He, on his most memorable shot he ever had, pushed the guy off, and shot the ball. So yes, they get away with some stuff for sure. Anyway, thanks for y'all.
Thank you, Brice. That was great. Just as a side note on that 2011 game, if Bob Stoops doesn't call timeout, that Heisman moment never happens. So that was, I love the hubris of that, trying to get us to, anyway, it's a long time Baylor fan. That was a great moment. Brice, thank you. It was an entertaining time. Okay, next meeting is going to be Tuesday the 7th, June the 7th, and we're back in our regular space, so back on the 4th floor. We're going to have a presentation on the Greater Waco Advanced Manufacturing Academy, otherwise known as DWAMA. So that'll be a great time as well. We'll all stand and say before we test the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth?
Is it fair to all concerned
Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Rotary's adjourned.